My guest today is Brett Gelman. Brett is a multi-talented actor, writer, and comedian whose work spans television, film, and stage. Brett has had several memorable roles in a variety of shows, such as BBC's Fleabag, FX's Married, and Netflix's Stranger Things, and has made guest appearances in some of the most loved comedy shows, including Curb Your Enthusiasm and The Office. Recently, he has also appeared on Israel's Eretz Nehederet SNL-style satire show. However, Brett is not only known for his impressive performances, but also for his outspoken stance against anti-Semitism. Brett, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
It's a real treat to have you on. You're one of those celebrities who are not afraid to embrace their Jewish identity, to speak out about anti-Semitism, and I think a lot of people really appreciate that. I mean, just to start things off, let me ask you, before we get into the nitty-gritty of anti-Semitism, how do
Yes.
you think your Jewish identity has shaped your career in comedy and acting?
Oh, well, first of all, I'll say I wouldn't say that I'm not afraid. I definitely feel fear, as I think uh, everyone does. Every Jew does right now. It's but I have to stand up against my own fear in order to speak out.
Mm.
Because I think if you're not afraid, then you're insane. But that being said, to answer your question, I mean, my Jewish identity, it's just so much a part of my makeup. It's just a part of who I am. I saw this quote by Leonard Cohen, this interview with him that's been going around social media, this little snippet where he's like, it's completely who I am. There's just,
Mm.
there's no separation. I grew up a Reform Jew. I'm not religious. I didn't go to Israel until last spring for the first time. Um, and I think a lot of Jews I know in the States have not. I think we were bred to be afraid to go there. Israel wasn't important to us. It certainly was to my parents. I know they always donated and they were grateful for it. And um, were far from being, they were Zionists who didn't want, who were afraid to go there based on the terror attacks. That being said, I very much, I, just being Jewish, I grew up around all Jews. I grew up in a predominantly Jewish suburb of Chicago called Highland Park. And that's really so much of what I knew, and going to temple. And then I started to worship at the altar of the Jewish comedy gods like the Marx Brothers and Mel Brooks and uh, Albert Brooks, then Jerry and Larry. Yeah, it's just such an essential part of me, and
Mm.
how that shapes my career is. I think it shapes how I see the world. I think that like if you're a Jew, you do inherit this thing of feeling somewhat like an outsider, even if you grow up around all Jews. There's this thing of that even though you're with all Jews, that outside of that is not that. And when you meet that, it's very different.
Mm.
The way in which people interact with you is different than, and I'm sure, and every marginalized group feels this way, that if you're when you're in contact with your own, it's just there's a lot more ease to it. They know your personality, they know your thought process, even if they disagree with you. And so when you leave that, you immediately feel that feeling of being an outsider. And that's a lot of my characters. My characters are outsiders a lot of the time, people who are alienated, whether it's by the people around them or whether that alienation is self-inflicted. Of course, yeah, I'm a possessor of deep neurotic Jewish neurosis. It's impossible. It's impossible to escape it. Being an Ashkenazi Jew who grew up in Chicago, it's just, and so with that neurosis comes a lot of humor, and I also think one of the Jewish superheroes is being able to laugh at the darkest
Mm.
elements of life, the dark things in our personality. I think that we're instinctually bred to be able to do that. And that's very much a part of my voice as an actor, as a writer, as a comedic performer, and so I could go on, but yeah, that influences a lot, even if I'm not playing a Jewish character,
Mm.
uh
Mm. I really like what you said about how sort of a Jewish superpower is finding humor in difficult times, and actually since the horrific 7th of October atrocities, the Israeli satire show Eretz Nehederet, which you appeared on in the Christmas special, has been producing some really dark but funny moments. And I want to talk about your sketch for a minute, The Gospel According to Berkeley, where you played the role of a professor from Berkeley, University of California. Now, this episode did not hold back in its scathing observations about the current American university education system. And through parody and satire, The Gospel According to Berkeley incorporated practically every word and concept that is currently being weaponized against Jews and Israel. The sketch covers how Jesus has been rebranded as a Palestinian, and it describes Israel as a colonialist power, much in the same way that so many students and even professors are doing on campuses, both in the United States and in other countries as well. Now, let me ask you, what was your involvement in the sketch like? Did you contribute to the writing, and did you enjoy the experience of working on the show?
Oh, I love that show. It was such an honor to be on it, to be asked to be a part of it. Um, I mean, the right. No, I would say that the writing takes care of itself. Maybe I like have little tweaks, which is the nature of acting in a comedy sketch. But it's certainly they have some of the most brilliant comedy writers there are, and so yeah, I mostly just had to show up and do it, and it was really fun, and I was really honored to be a part of that sketch because that whole thing about Jesus being Palestinian
Mm.
is really like such a keyhole into looking into the absolute vastness of the intellectual laziness, the hypocrisy, the double standardness. Uh, they're so obsessed with calling out appropriation, and yet they do all of the things that they're against. It's the we are one of the most gaslit people throughout
Mm.
history. We're not only persecuted, we're continuously gaslit. And people come at us by behaving in ways that they're accusing us of behaving like, or they're accusing at least their other enemies, this whole concept of appropriation. And, uh, and I'm not saying that every accusation of cultural appropriation is wrong, and shouldn't be done. But that's crazy. That's crazy to just and I can repeat everything that so many people have said of like breaking down why that is just an absolute falsehood,
Mm.
and so it's deeply disturbing too that this is coming out of the centers of supposedly the most educated Americans.
Yeah.
This shows the crazy foundation that has been laid in this country and, in your country as well, of just like deep anti-Semitism that has been built in. And it is I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but it is obviously a long game, concerted effort in order to push this, because this did not just happen on October 7th. This was propaganda that was laid out. This was teaching very malleable minds, no matter how quote unquote intelligent, that it was pushing them to think and feel in a certain very extreme way. And it was very smart. It's very smart. It's to enter into poisoning their thought process with disguising it as righteousness, disguising it as justice, but to hold us to a different standard and to demonize us in this way. It's shocking, and yet it's not. It's historically unoriginal, but at the same time, it's shocking that you're seeing this rise up in the universities, and we're literally living through history right now.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of concern, and understandably so, about Jewish students on campus at the moment. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, within the past few weeks, we've seen people with large banners that says Zionists off campus. We've seen a Hillel house, a synagogue and a Jewish center, be defaced with graffiti that says IDF off campus. These are just regular Jewish students trying to attend services and prayers. So the fact that this is going on right now and targeting them specifically is absolutely unacceptable. And it is anti-Semitism. You've spoken a lot about anti-Semitism even before October 7th. I'm wondering, when did you start? Was it something you've always spoken out about, or was there a moment when you were like, well, actually now I need to start raising my voice about this?
Well, I think that there was I definitely got louder about it. I don't think I don't think I truly grasped anti-Semitism until 3 or 4 years ago, in the way that it personally affected me. I think I'm a liberal, and I think I somewhat bought into the whole progressive mentality. And I hate to call it progressive because it's not progressive. It's it's hate, and it's hard. It sucks to call hate progressive. I bought into the fact that I was white and that I would benefited from white privilege. And it was when I met my wife to be, Ari Diane, who is also a liberal, but she is Israeli. Her grandparents were Holocaust survivors who lived in Israel. They experienced firsthand that experience of the worst degradation that a human being could experience, the worst horror nightmare, their family brutally murdered, that they themselves brutally abused, and then finding solace and safety and humanity in Israel. My people came to the United States in the early 1900s. They escaped a different thing, but there was a bit of a separation there. And so I think, and it was also, I think, like growing up around all Jews in the way that I did, I think that I somewhat maybe, and this need to be liked, made me sort of ignored that I was the only Jew in the room a lot of the time.
Right.
I was so used to not being the only Jew in the room, and I so much want things to be okay, that I would just deny that maybe the people I was surrounded with had some unconscious biases of their own. Maybe I wasn't the only one. And so I really awakened to that, to the fact that I was a member of a marginalized group, and that, I had spent so much time speaking out for other groups, which I, won't stop and I don't regret doing. But then I better start speaking out for me and my own people and start building up the pride in myself as a Jewish person and start standing defiant, because I started to see these things happening, and I started to notice rhetoric online and even amongst people that I knew that was problematic, dismissive at best, a great erasure of our pain and our struggle, and lies that were being created, that we were white, which I refuse to accept now. I don't think any Jew, no matter how white their skin is white, because, go talk to a white supremacist.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it caused this shift. I probably started to get the most vocal when that meme was out by Bella Hadid that Israelis were colonizers. And I saw the reaction to it. And I saw people that I knew reposting it. It was the brilliant thing that was done where it, where whoever was filtering in that propaganda was relating the Palestinian-Israeli conflict to the Black American struggle in the United States, essentially. And that Israelis and Jews were white and Palestinians were of color. And it's just so deeply, it's just wrong. And it's nationalistically narcissistic, of just only being, and this is a problem that Americans have anyway. They just think so much just functions like America and don't seek to understand the culture and mentalities of anybody, or of what exists outside of this country. I mean, the average American, they probably couldn't name like 3 foreign world leaders, because of this narcissism, not because it's, and because we've been brought up to think like we're it. Like, ask any person who's not American what they think of an American, right? An American comes into the restaurant and it's like, oh God, how much are they going to ask for menu changes here? Anyway, I'm not anti-American. Let me be very clear. I just am poking fun at us right now, poking fun at myself as well. No, but and so I started to speak out against that, and then I started just to see, like, in terms of whenever there was a conflict in Israel, just how it immediately weighed the other way. And how it was, there was no empathy towards the Israelis, that they were being attacked.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the response is. And I'm not educated enough. I'm not in the military, so I'm not educated enough to, comment on that. But when you only criticize the Israeli government,
Right.
and you only criticize the Israeli military, and you don't at least also criticize these terrorist regimes and these radical regimes that are funding them, and and all of the things that they have done against the Jewish people and against Israel, well, then, I say anti-Semitism, plain and simple. I mean, I'm repeating a lot of things that people way more educated than me have said. But, and so I just started to see that inconsistency.
Well, I mean, even worse than that, there are some who claim that Hamas are not a terrorist group, that they're in fact a resistance group, that they're freedom fighters, and that's perhaps one of the most sickening things to come out of all of this. Now, I wanna sort of ask you about how you have been directly impacted by the events of 7th of October. So I know that you are currently promoting your book, The
Yeah.
Terrifying Realm of the Possible Nearly True Stories, but recently you announced on Instagram that two bookshops had decided to cancel your book signing events with them. Now, one of the bookshops, the bookstore, I believe, said it had cancelled the event because it didn't think it, and I'm going to quote, it didn't think it could guarantee the comfort and security of its attendees. Now, Brett, let me ask you, what does that say that in 2024, a bookshop feels it is necessary to cancel an event because of anti-Semitic threats and intimidation from anti-Israel mobs? I mean, how does that make you feel?
I think it's complete intimidation. This has nothing to do, this just has to do with destroying Jewish lives and careers. It is an attack on me. It is an attack on that bookstore for hosting me. There's lots of artists that I have problems with, of things they've said and done. I don't call up the venues that are hosting them and threaten them. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe that people should be able to, no matter how horrendous the things they say, unless they're contributing to propaganda, But I know that my hands are clean, that I have not, and I haven't, as much as people want to claim that I've spoken out, that I'm anti-Palestinian or I'm Islamophobic or I'm a white supremacist. I've never said anything like that. I've gone out of my way to make it very clear that I am not talking about any of those people. About Palestinians, about Muslims. I'm talking about radicals, in the same way that I would talk about white supremacists. And so, yeah, it's just it's complete anti-Semitic intimidation. They want to ruin a Jew's career in the best way that that they can, and it's disgusting. But hey, keep coming at me. Keep coming at me so I can keep speaking about it, so I can sell more copies of my book, and so I can make, and so that you can show yourselves as the villains that you are, as the hateful monsters that you are, as the deeply ignorant, misinformed, misguided morons that they are. And it's unfortunate that the bookstore didn't have a more of a conversation with me. And I'm not saying that the bookstore is anti-Semitic or anybody who works there is. I don't know them. I didn't have communication with them. It was all through my publisher. But we could have just maybe discussed what security looked like. And we could have maybe shown in the United States we're not going to we're not going to lay down to that type of intimidation. Because I think once you start to do that, then then things start to look very scary.
Yeah, it sets a precedent.
Yeah.
And if
it's the same thing of like, I know people who were speaking out and then they stopped because of intimidation, and I get it. It's very scary. I myself am very scared, sometimes. But if you back down, you show them that bullying is effective. And we can't do that.
I do have to ask now, sort of generally, how are you feeling safety wise for yourself and your family? Do you walk around sort of worried, or do you sort of more or less feel okay, or how are you doing?
It's that thing, it's that reality of like, it's most likely okay. but there is a percentage that's not. Absolutely. I'm a Zionist who is speaking out, who is somewhat known. And
Mm.
and there is, unfortunately, a reason I'm one of the only ones, who is doing that. And I think a lot of that has to do with fear. And I don't think, yeah, and I don't know what the greater Hollywood community, who of my peers support what I'm saying and who don't, you know? I don't know. I don't know what's being said about me in certain rooms. I do know all the people close to me are very supportive,
Mm.
my representation and uh, my collaborators are all very supportive.
Yeah,
And
that's wonderful.
and so I'm very grateful for that. Um, and obviously my family, and yeah, I've lost friends. That's a very scary thing in and of itself, to lose friends. But then this thing happened, though. It's this, you realize, oh, these people weren't your friends. They never really saw you. They
Yeah.
had some unconscious biases or conscious biases, where I guess maybe I was one of the good ones for that period of time, because I was shitting on myself. But once I stepped out of the toilet, I I think they're like, no, 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 you're supposed to be in there. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think that's happened to a lot of us too. I think that, like, these students and these so-called progressives are like, wait, 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 wait. No, 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 you're supposed to be in there. It is scary. I mean, I I I have to take certain precautions. I have to think about being in public in a different type of way. Um,
Mm.
but I'm not going to allow it to make me, to not live my life. That then they've won. So it's also in how I live. It's also in how I go about every moment of the day, of like fear. That's what I mean, is that, standing up to my own fear as well, but also making sure that I'm taking the necessary precautions to keep me and my family safe. Um,
Yeah.
and that's crazy. So anybody who is marching right now, even if, like, you're not meaning to, be violent and hostile, you're standing by people who are.
Mm.
I don't know about you, but if I was, like, marching for a cause, and members of that cause were calling for violence and behaving in this way, I'd be like, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be a part of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
I
know
mean,
that that's like what they think about us, that we're standing by this genocidal military monstrosity, and marching with that. But the reality is, we're not. That is a democracy that is having to respond, unfortunately, in a military way.
you mentioned something which I think a lot of people have experienced, which is this feeling of losing friends. And last year, on the 14th of November, you spoke very passionately about this at the March for Israel in Washington, D.C. You addressed a crowd of 300,000 people, and you said, "A lot of friends turned their backs on me this month. I feel betrayed in a way that I never felt possible." And I think you expressed something that a lot of Jews are experiencing right now. What was it like speaking at that rally? Because I think it was very well received and needed.
Well, it was insane. I couldn't believe that I was there. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, me? Uh, I mean, I'm standing in the same place that Martin Luther King and Gloria Steinem and Barack Obama stood in. It's was wild. It was absolutely wild. But I felt like I had to really seize that moment. and impart my clarity onto that crowd. And it was a lot of kids, a lot of really frightened kids. And I really do believe this. I don't think we can change minds, and I don't think that like the Jews should have to like qualify standing up for ourselves and have to continuously say like, you know, these qualifications of, oh, I'm not, you know, I'm not, I don't celebrate the bombing of Gaza, and I believe in peace, and I'm not Islamophobic, and I'm talking about radical Islam and not moderate Islam, you know. And I was just like, no other group has to do that. No other group has to continuously qualify like that. And I've qualified on this podcast right now. I am instinctually doing that. And you know what I wanted these kids? I wanted these kids to feel pride and strength, because yes, there's possibilities for violence, but at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of these people are true cowards who are going to try to push it to an extent to just make us run away. And that's the last thing that we can do. And we have to feel solidarity with our own community. You know, I mean, I even see it amongst my fellow Jews of this obsession for allyship. And that's got to stop. That's got to stop. You know, I not that I want to alienate allies or deny allies access, but we have to believe that we are enough. We have to stop like hiding and running in the diaspora and like reaching for other people to block us from this. We have to feel the strength in ourselves, and we have to feel solidarity as a community. It's essential.
Yeah. There's I think there's quite a worrying intimidation of not only Jewish voices in the community, but Jewish celebrities as well. And I want to bring your attention to an incident that happened last year in November with your Stranger Things co-star Noah Schnaps. He posted a video in which he was holding up stickers which said Zionism is sexy and Hamas is ISIS. Now, this led to him receiving online backlash from anti-Zionists, with some Stranger Things fans threatening to boycott the latest season of the show. How did this treatment of Noah make you feel?
Enraged. I mean, this kid's had a hard couple, you know, intense couple of years between that and he came out, you know, and the homophobia that he had to face because of that, I'm sure, you know, amongst some fans who were leaning other ways, you know. And I want to be clear that I'm not like, you know, I don't obsessively follow his social media presence, you know. So, and you know what? I didn't even watch that whole video. You know, it was described to me. But in its description, I don't think that those two, and I've said this before, I don't think those two stickers are problematic at all. I think Zionism is sexy. I think the belief in Israel's existence is sexy. And what is not sexy is how people have redefined Zionism to match their anti-Semitism. That's not sexy. That people's lack of knowledge of what Zionism actually means is not sexy at all. Zionism, very sexy.
Yeah, I mean, look, Zionism is the basic belief that Jews have the right to self-determination, as any group of people do, in their indigenous homeland, which is modern-day Israel. And you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. Now, it just so happens that in this country, we recently polled the British Jewish community, and 80% of the Jewish community said they were Zionists. Only 6% said they were not Zionists. So when you're coming out with things like Zionists are racist, Zionists are white supremacists, you're talking about 80% of the Jewish community in Britain. And I'm not sure people either don't realize that or they do realize that and they just couldn't care less.
Yeah, that 6%. Yeah. I mean, I'm very confused by them. I don't know how bad things got to get for them to become scientists
Yeah.
over there, but it's pretty bad where you live, and so that's wild to me that
Yeah.
they would say they're not.
Well, we were
Um,
talking
what?
before the
Yeah,
podcast, and you were sort of, we were having conversation. You were like, "Good Lord, what is happening in Britain?"
yeah. It's horrifying. I can't imagine. It's bad here. It's and but there is, it feels really like on the cusp of something very, very dangerous going on. If not, I mean, it's already happening. And it's happening here too, but it just feels so extreme where you are. And I feel for you. And yeah, so I think Zionism is sexy. But
Mm.
you said the definition of it way better than me. That's sexy.
Yeah.
And then the other sticker said Hamas is ISIS.
Mm.
Yeah, Hamas is a terrorist group.
While we're on the topic of Zionism being sexy, you on your social media have really, in a very interesting way, made Judaism sexy to a lot of people. And I have to ask you, because people are going to ask me why I didn't ask, what is Jadi?
It's a Jewish zaddy. It's a Jewish zaddy. And that was one thing that, I was doing before too, that I just saw like this, I don't know, desexualization of Jews. And, and I'm like, I'm sexy. The Jews I know are hot. We're seriously people. And, and I wanted to like go back to that, like, American 70s sexual pride,
Yeah.
that Elliot Gould vibe, and really bring that back, not only in my swagger, but in my fashion, and show
Mm.
that, like, a full on Jew like me could have knowledge of fashion and represent fashion in the way that I was and have been.
Brett, let me ask you as we begin to wind down, if someone who is not Jewish comes to you and says that they want to help in the fight against anti-Semitism, where should they start?
They should start by speaking out and trying to flip the algorithm on these platforms. They should really make sure that they're educated about the history of Israel and the history of the Middle East, and they should be, seeing all of the different Jewish orgs that are in, and try to become a part of that, but unfortunately, we're living in a world where social media is very dominant. I pray for the day that it all just goes away, but because it's at the end of the day, very destructive towards society. But I feel the need to be active on there because that's just it exists. Can't
Mm.
deny its existence, and have to do my part in not allowing it to flip the other way. And also, there's a lot of Jews and Israelis on social media who get comfort, with my speaking out and with any allies speaking out. So
Mm.
speak out, and and educate by example, educate by example. And if you do, and if you feel like you can make headway in your communities, try and do that. And then, connect with organizations that you can help. If you can donate, donate to all the organizations that help Israel and help the Jewish people and fight anti-Semitism.
Yeah. And on that note, I just want to say if people do want to donate to us, they can go to antisemitism.org/donate. Brett, before I let... Sorry, go on.
Oh, and then and buy my book.
Yes, well, let me ask you, before I let you go, tell the listeners, what have you got going on? What have you got coming up? And where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Brett Gelman, BrettGelman. And my book, The Terrifying Realm of the Possible, is available on Day Street, HarperCollins. And it doesn't have anything to do with this war and the current state. I wrote it before this all happened, but it's definitely
can you say
it's
anything
definitely
about
Jewish. Oh yeah, it's like it's a very darkly comedic, surreal book of short stories that's based around 5 different characters. One is a child, one is a teenager, one is an adult man, one is an older woman, and one is a dead person, in the afterlife. And there's about 5 pieces for each character. And I'll say that it's a bullet of anxiety, of comedic anxiety. It really gets into, I'd say it's emotionally autobiographical, not necessarily factually autobiographical, and it's like very much a purge of my deep anxiety and my self-hatred as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's
Right,
it's definitely laughing at the dragon, as Joan Rivers always used to say.
She was great.
The best.
She was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brett Gelman, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much for coming on Podcast Against Antisemitism.
No, and thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for having me. It's been so great talking to you.